a very intensive and time-consuming lifestyle like that of a bodybuilder, relationships definitely, just by calculating time, definitely don't help. But today I want to talk about a topic that took me so much to understand in my quest in bodybuilding and in self-optimization or biohacking in general. And this is the topic of the conflict of interest between different goals and different plans in life, and balancing all these different plans in a way that doesn't really cause you any trouble in one aspect that might be very important to you in your development as a human being. And I'm going to give an example by bodybuilding, because this is what I started with to enhance myself and reach like the most optimal version of myself that I can, with, of course, different goals in mind. And we all have these subconscious themes for why we do stuff. You might be training so hard and you want to get a great body, but it's the great body itself is not really the goal. But for example, it's to get women or things of that sort. But I'm going to go back to the point of that conflict between different goals. So let's say you bodybuild and you go like hardcore bodybuilding for so many years naturally. Then you move up to anabolics and you start with different compounds and stuff. And let's say you get in the first cycle, and after the first cycle you start to have substantial hair loss, right? Now this is a perfect example of a conflict of interest where technically your looks start to suffer a lot because you are focusing so much on your body, and you're not balancing, or you're not having a complete picture in your head of the whole optimization across like a broad range of things that you want to attack. So you lose your hair, so you end up being the bold, big bodybuilder that doesn't really get attention from women. And if this is really what you wanted to do bodybuilding for in the first place, then that beats the point completely, and you end up, being that, whatever, I don't want to judge people, but you end up being that what some people might call the freak or whatever, who might be just a big guy but doesn't get really attention from women because, well, you're bald and all the other side effects of steroids. And for some people, steroids not only can cause substantial hair loss, but it also can age the skin in the face a lot. But this is a different issue. But so this is one perfect example of how this conflict of interest can happen between two things that originally you thought you were optimizing, but since you only optimized for one thing, and this is just the body, it's just the perfection of the body, it came at the expense of something else, which is the hair loss. Now, of course, this all can be balanced, with different things and different compounds that you can take. And this is not a video about hair loss, but it's just one example. Another example would be just health, right? So if you're optimizing for just body or just bodybuilder, a theme that you're going to come across in bodybuilding is frequent eating, right? You have to keep supplying your body with frequent meals every 2-3 hours. When I was in some phases of my bulking, I used to eat every 2 to 3 hours. And if you know anything about protecting your insulin sensitivity and the pancreatic system, spiking your glycemic index up and down so much and so frequently across the day is not the best way to basically not get diabetes, right? So this is another example of a conflict of interest between, let's say, optimizing your insulin sensitivity and the health of your pancreas versus optimizing for just sheer muscle mass and size and maybe shape, right? So definitely insulin sensitivity does not improve with increasing the frequency of eating, you know. And if you go into something different, like for example intermittent fasting, which is you limit the window of eating to, let's say, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, that's a completely different thing. It's a completely different issue. It's a completely different topic, and that this might affect the frequency of your training or even your recovery at sometimes, you know. Now, the second big theme also is brain optimization. So let's just take a step away and take like an overview look of brain optimization, right? So if you're trying to optimize for the brain now, right? You're not trying to optimize for just the body. So you want to be the most intelligent, you know, person that you can be at some given point. Okay, so here, let's say for example, you want to increase the bandwidth of information that you can process at any given unit of time, right? At any given hour. So instead of being able to read, you know, I don't know, 300, 400 words a minute, you want to push that up to 700, 600 words a minute, right? And you also want to work on your comprehension rate to increase that as well, meaning you don't just want to increase the bandwidth of how much information you can process, but you also want to increase the amount of comprehension. So how much information you're able to keep from all the information that you processed. You're going to have to deal with a completely different set of compounds, namely some stimulants, like for example modafinil or modafinil, some types of amphetamines, and these definitely don't help with the appetite. A lot of these stimulants would definitely curb your appetite in a way that would greatly interfere with your bodybuilding quest or goals. And this is not going to be, you know, the most optimal strategy if your main focus is just optimizing for your body or optimizing for muscle mass at a specific point in your life. And you know, plans over time is a different issue, and I'm going to talk about this issue later. Of balancing goals basically over time. But this is a second example, right, of how a completely different view of things can alter the way you plan your whole life, or you plan your whole protocol in doing a specific thing. Hair loss protocols, if you're going to go back to this topic, is many of them include using compounds like, you know, finasteride, dutasteride, and definitely finasteride and dutasteride will not be optimal for muscle building. I'm not going to say they're going to extremely hurt muscle building, but they're definitely not going to be amazingly beneficial for bodybuilding or for the optimization of muscle mass and at the lowest probable body fat percentage, right? Dihydrotestosterone definitely contributes to the hardness of the muscles and definitely contributes to some factors that would increase the overall dry and solid look of the body. And when you block dihydrotestosterone with these 5-alpha reductase inhibitors, type 1, type 2, and so forth, this definitely is not going to contribute to an optimal bodybuilding protocol. But in an overall system where somebody's trying to look good and at the same time have a good body to an extent of looking good without sacrificing hair loss and getting bald, this would be a competent goal, right? In when somebody's not basically trying to get the best body that they can without losing their hair. So now you have two variables involved in your game plan, and this is going to change everything, because that's going to be different than somebody who's only optimizing for body. like a just hardcore bodybuilder that really doesn't care about hair, right? This same pattern is going to occur across balancing different goals in life. Relationships, right? So relationships are another aspect of life, so that might interfere with some of your goals in life. Relationships take time, they take investment. They might not be the most optimal thing for a bodybuilder trying to optimize his body and basically optimize his recovery, training, nutrition, with a very intensive and time-consuming lifestyle like that of a bodybuilder. Relationships definitely, just by calculating time, definitely don't help. But if this is one of your goals in life, then this is something that you're going to optimize for. And this, by just virtue of mathematics, will mean that your bodybuilding is going to suffer a little bit and your other protocols in life are going to suffer a little bit or be sacrificed to an extent, right? Even in different sports, they will not complement each other. For example, if you train specifically for bodybuilding or specifically for hypertrophy training, which is the goal of maximizing the size of the muscle and then purifying that muscle over time and turning it into just a solid, hard block of pure muscle with minimal body fat, this will definitely conflict with somebody who's training for mixed martial arts or a specific type of martial arts where you have to balance strength with endurance, with stamina, with a lot of different things, and just gaining so much muscle will actually be counterproductive for a quest like that of somebody who's practicing mixed martial arts or trying to go in the UFC or trying to compete in a professional sport, or even someone that competes with his buddies in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym or in a wrestling gym. Definitely adding the most amount of muscle will not be the most optimal way. As a matter of fact, a lot of fighters, they try and their goal is to fight at the least maximum weight that they can possibly can. And then, of course, after they have like 24 hours to resupply their body with carbohydrates and sodium and water and all that stuff, and they can gain as much as 10 to 15 pounds just in that 24 to 36 hours of the refill. And the same happens with bodybuilding, and the difference between the waiting day and the fighting day, right? Or the waiting day and the show day. So when we look at somebody and we analyze, somebody, or even ourselves sometimes, we really cut ourselves short in the sense that we always only analyze things from a very tight and short perspective, right? We do not see the whole picture of the complete set of goals or this complete game plan that a person might have, and thus the sacrifices or the balances that he might be making to achieve some of the goals that he wants to achieve. Maybe somebody wants to keep his hair at the expense of being just a big muscle mass guy. So these are some of the points that I wanted to go over in this video, and so the first point or the first theme is the balance and conflict between those different things, and the second theme is definitely the level of detail is definitely affected by those balances, right? So whenever you focus so much on something, on one thing, let's say it's bodybuilding, that depth, how deep you go into something, definitely affects the range of probabilities of knowledge and of competence that you have in other aspects of life. So if I'm focusing too much on the body, maybe my intellect or my reading capacity, or let's say brain power and bandwidth and processing capacity and everything that we talked about, it's not going to be optimal, because eating too much and eating too frequently doesn't only affect you on the dimension of time, but it also affects you on a dimension of brain performance. I mean, eating so much carbs all the time is definitely not the best strategy for optimal brain performance, at least on my perspective. I mean, one of the things that happen is that you get a lot of carb crashes, right? And I've done it in some ways. I've done some very low glycemic index carbohydrates and managed to put out good, brain performance as far as, learning new courses and learning new skills, especially in the fields of some, mathematics or computer programming. But the point is, just as a time function, you're wasting so much time preparing the food, making the food, and most of these intellectual capacities need long blocks of time, long blocks of focus, that you are focusing on one thing to be able to process that much information and comprehend that information, that just the act of supplying the body with so much food over time will be a hindrance to your to the flow of your focus, right? And this is one point. The other point, of course, is the effect of the carbohydrates and whatnot. And one way to mitigate that's, different dietary protocols like the ketogenic diet and so on and so forth. And I'm going to talk about that later. But this is just another example of how these balances can affect each other and affect the optimization of different goals, right? So now the third point is the ultimate life plan and end game for everybody, right? So, let's say the mean life expectancy in the United States for a human is 80 years, right? So out of those 80 years, not all people want to get the same thing, right? Some people want to be the best bodybuilders. Some people want to have a great body, but not be 100%, but at the same time include with that a different goal, like becoming a good programmer, or running a successful business, or learning a lot about finance and economics. And in that complete game plan, definitely the bodybuilding is going to suffer, but the success of the game plan is only evaluated based on the goals of that game plan. It's not evaluated on the metrics of a bodybuilder, right? Because the original goal of just that person was not to be the biggest bodybuilder at Mr. Olympia, right? His goal was to balance these different things. So if he's able to balance these different things to a high degree of optimization, this in and out of itself is a lot of success, right? And a lot of people don't pay attention to that when they're looking at somebody or when they're judging somebody. And not to mention that just the bodybuilding is a very intensive sport. It's a very intensive quest, meaning it's like having, 2-3 full-time jobs just to create and maintain a lot of muscle and that big perfection of a body. Takes a lot more time and a lot more energy than a lot of people consider. And to do that for a long period of time, it's not only not so much sustainable for most people, but it's very, very taxing on the body and the system. And I'm talking in terms of long-term health, in terms of the different organs of the body, like the cardiovascular system, your pancreatic system, your kidneys, your liver. It is the bodybuilding lifestyle, and just carrying a lot of mass and a lot of weight. It's very intensive, and it's very taxing on the human body. And a lot of studies have actually shown a correlation between the size of the body, or even height in some senses, and the average lifespan of a human being, meaning smaller people tend to live longer than bigger people, right? So the flow and orchestration of all these variables together, in my opinion, is one of the things that can be very tough to do, but it can be done, especially in this day and age where we have a lot of access to a lot of the scientific literature and a lot of the open source information that we have right now. And the reason I originally made this video is because it took me so long to understand all these different aspects of life, right? You know, all these different aspects of balancing and managing so many different goals. So with that being said, I hope this video is beneficial in some ways to some people, and that it shed helpful light on some of these patterns that some of us, starting with the journey of self-enhancement in general and self-optimization in general, might overlook, especially young people, you know, starting with bodybuilding and tending to focus so much on bodybuilding and forget about a more complete picture where bodybuilding is only a part of this self-optimization journey, but it's not the complete thing. And definitely being able to balance all these different aspects of life and not sacrifice everything else on a lot of other things for one specific thing that might cause regrets later for somebody. So I hope this video is helpful in showing some of these patterns, and I'll see you guys next time.